Hi folks, welcome to SQE1 window, and today we will talk about damages and causation. This is part of the series that we are doing on tort law to prepare ourselves for SQE1. So we have named it as chapter 4, and that's same in our notes and MCQs bank that we will be creating, and it will be available for everyone. So to start with, it is a last piece of puzzle that you understand damages, that how damage works. It's not damages, it's damage. Let me correct myself. This is where the claimant must show they actually suffered a legally recognized loss because of the defendant's breach. Now, not every harm counts. If someone hurts your feeling, but not your finances or body, Tort is not your therapist. It is your accountant. It looks at finances. It does not look most of the time at emotion. Like, for example, someone you love, they don't love you back at that point. Tort will not come and help you. You can't go to court. The law recognizes physical injury, psychiatric illness, and in limited cases, economic loss as well. But emotional upset without medical evidence, if it is in SQE exam or in real life, there is no claim. And importantly, the claimant must prove two things to claim tort. One is causation in fact and causation in law. In other words, did the breach actually cause the harm? And even if it did, is the law willing to hold the defendant responsible? If you think of negligence as a crime story, causation is the detective work, connecting the suspect to the damage. But once again, a caveat, it is not a crime. So another thing that we need to look at, it is causation and effect that we used on our previous slide. This is the famous but-for test, the bread and butter of every SQE causation question, and you will find a load of questions on it. Ask, would the harm have occurred but for the defendant's breach? If the answer is yes, causation fails. If no, defendant is caught. Take Barnett versus Chelsea. It's a famous case law. A man went to hospital after drinking poison tea. The doctor negligently sent him home, but evidence showed he would have died anyway. The hospital was negligent, yes it was, but not the cause of death. In this case, there was no liability found. That's a perfect SQE1 trap. Students see negligence and death and think liable. But without factual causation, the chain breaks, whatever was the consequence of something. Now, life is rarely simple. Sometimes multiple causes mix. For example, asbestos exposure, medical negligence, multiple defendant. The court steps in with flexible approaches like Fairchild case for industrial diseases. So when a question shows more than one possible causes, slow down and ask, who actually caused the loss? Or did each make a material contribution? So that's what you need to look at before you answer a question of cause and effect. So another thing that we need to explore is causation in law, and that is actually remoteness. Even if the breach caused the harm in fact, the law will not always hold the defendant responsible. So why? Because some damage is just too far remote, or it is something that cannot be connected, that cannot connect the dots in tort. This is where the Wagon Mound, a case from 1961, comes in. Engineers spilled oil in harbor. Days later, it caught fire and caused huge damage. The court said the specific type of fire damage was not foreseeable. So no liability, but don't go too far. The defendant does not have to foresee the exact chain of event, just the type of harm. In Hughes versus Lord Advocate from 1963, two boys played with a paraffin lamp left by workmen, fell into a hole because of that, and were burned by an explosion. The court said burns were foreseeable, even if the explosion was not, so liability was found. So here is your SQE trick. Look for the phrase like reasonably foreseeable type of harm. If it is a weird, freakish consequence, the damages is probably too remote. So you can't connect the dots if these kind of words are there in your question. So intervening act, another thing that you need to look at. Was there any intervening act between cause and effect? Now, for a bit of Latin flair, that is novus actus intervenens, which means a new act intervening, is how the chain of causation can be broken. Think of it like this. You set off a small domino chain, for example, but halfway through, someone else knocks the table and sends everyone flying. Your original acts no longer explain the final result. The law recognizes three main interrupters here, the claimant's own unreasonable act, like in McHugh versus Holland, where the claimant jumps downstairs on an injured leg and made things worse for themselves. The third party's independent act, like in Knightley versus Johns, where police officer error created new harm. There can be natural element, for example, those rare unforeseeable act of nature like Karlslogi steamship. You need to just look at it. The key test here was the new act independent and foreseeable? If yes, the defendant is off the hook. The defendant is saved. So when you see SQE1 question with a strange twist, an earthquake, a reckless rescuer, or a claimant doing something foolish, your instinct should shout. Possible, break the chain, and you can save the person. So that's what you need to look at. And now we will look at SQE1 focus on applying damages and causation. So that's what is very, very important for us to understand. Let's bring it home and get practical. Every negligence problem in SQE1 has one hidden challenge: figuring out whether the loss is too remote or too disconnected to claim for. Your process should be simple. Step 1, apply the but for test. Number 2, ask if any new acts broke the chain. And number 3, decide if the damage that happened or the harm that happened was reasonably foreseeable. Watch out 3 pitfalls: mixing up causation with duty or breach, ignoring remoteness, many students stop after but for, forgetting that type of harm, not the exact consequence, must be foreseeable. And when in doubt, ask yourself the golden question: was this harm too remote or fairly linked to the defendant's breach? That one line captures the logic of causation. Remember it, and you shall turn tricky problem question into easy mark. Thank you very much for joining us. We will be providing you notes and question bank on all these topics. Have a good day.